But Brandon, let's move on to the next topic. And the one thing I will say, we made an amendment after setting up the camera for this second segment. We were going to do our big board this week. We're going to push it until after week 1. So the top 10 for our first big board won't be until next week. I didn't expect to go almost an hour on our college football predictions, but sometimes it goes like that, B, and we just get into the rhythm and we just can't stop. And it was a great hour of podcasting. But the next topic we have to talk about, and that is Urban Meyer. You had done That's What I Think with Brandon Swanson. I'm going to put it right up there above your head for people to check out that have not checked it out, although this was before the decision had happened that you recorded this. But Urban Meyer, it is now decided, will be suspended 3 games from the university. He will not be able to coach the Oregon State game, the Rutgers game, or the TCU game. The first question, I know what this is going to get into eventually, but to start, I want to ask you the football question of what does this mean on the field for Ohio State football?
Well, it just means that they're going to have an interim coach out there. I mean, their offensive coordinator is going to be the acting coach. They know what they need to do, though. Mm-hmm. They know what they need to do. They know how the game plan is going to go. I mean, Urban Meyer has been out there for a good chunk of the off season. He's been gone for a couple of weeks now, mm-hmm. in away from the team, but I don't think that they've steered from the game plan and the game plan that he's always had. I also think that when you're playing Oregon State and Rutgers as the first 2 teams, I think that there's really there shouldn't be a sense of like, oh, we really need Urban Meyer out here for these 2 games. Mm-hmm. And they really don't. The third game will be the bit of a test with TCU.
Especially with Patterson on the other side.
But again, I still think that you're not going to stray from the mm-hmm. from the game plan that is going to get you a win. You're not going to stray from the game plan mm-hmm. that Ohio State has gone with for a long time. I mean, it's not like Urban Meyer's been gone for a year or mm-hmm. 3 months. He hasn't. Mm-hmm. He's been able to work with the guys and talk with them and go through the playbook and everything like that, and especially for the new guys. This isn't going to be a shocker for them. It's going to be something, I think, and I think you're on the other side, mm-hmm. I think this is going to give a lot of motivation to Ohio State. You think they're going to rally around him once he's back. I think they're going to rally and come together because he's not there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for me, the big thing is, I'm going to say kind of, I guess I disagree just from the phrasing of it. But like when you said that, oh, you'll be on the other side, I gave you that weird look like, Brandon, I just said they were going to go undefeated, win the national championship. How much on the other side can I not be?
You're on the other side, not in terms of a loss, but yes. in terms of how they're going to
rally
play.
When he gets back rather than during it. And for me, that's the big thing when I've been watching like ESPN, Fox Sports about this is the players, it sounds like it's same deal to them where they go out there. It doesn't matter that Urban's not there. We know the game plan. We know what to do. They're not sweating it. The thing that worries me, the only thing that worries me in this is the coaching. And although at the end of this 3-game stretch, we're not going to look at it as a mistake, I'm going to go out and say it is a mistake to me that athletic director Gene Smith named Coach Day the head coach of this Ohio. And it's already showing in my mind that you made the wrong choice. Although, like I said, it's not going to effing matter because they're going to win all 3 games and maybe lose against TCU. But even if they lose against TCU, it's not going to be like, oh, did you make the wrong choice? No, we're not going to be talking about that. But I'm going to bring it up now where your head coach, because he's an interim head coach, has described already taking over for Urban Meyer as a whirlwind of a month. Now, to Ohio State fans, it might be like, well, what do you expect? It's the first time that he's been thrown into a head coaching role. Two things I want to bring up. First off, you have two other coaches with head coaching experience. One who should be a head coach at Tennessee, nothing against Jeremy Pruitt, but Greg Schiano should be the coach of the Volunteers right now. He should be in Knoxville getting ready for this upcoming season. You also have Kevin Wilson, who has head coaching experience. Yet you say no to them, we're going to go with Day. The second one, and this to me is the most important point, and to me, hearing this, my first thought was, how did you not pick him? I know why they didn't. Same reason why Tennessee did and then didn't, was they were talking about practice, and this was on ESPN on College Football Live. And they're like, when you're at Ohio State practice, Coach Day is not the one where he's not like Urban Meyer, where he's going to walk around to the different groups. He's mainly stayed with the quarterbacks. What he would normally do if Urban Meyer was there. However, you've got Greg Schiano, who's a defensive guy, walking around to everybody. Offense, defense, different units, doing exactly what Urban Meyer would be doing. And I know to these coaches, to Wilson, Schiano, Day, it doesn't give a shit. Like, they don't matter. They don't care who's got the interim tag. At the end of the day, all three of them just want to win the games. And, like, me getting upset about this is not like they're upset about it. It's just, for me, I look at it and go, why did you name... Maybe it doesn't matter that they named Day interim because it's just a useless title that's going to be taken away once Urban Meyer comes back, because there's no way that Urban loses the job after this, after he gets suspended for 3 games. I sit there and I go, why make him the head coach when it's obvious in practice that Greg Schiano is acting more like a head coach than Day?
I think that you kind of answered that already. It really doesn't much matter. I think Day is... Maybe it's because Day is going to be able to have a little bit more focus on the offense, which is maybe where they won it with Haskins and J.K. Dobbins and everyone like that. And maybe it's because it's Haskins and they, he's going to be coming in new. J.T. Barrett's been the guy the last couple of seasons, and this is going to be Haskins' first time coming in here at Ohio State. So maybe that's why they do that, because they want to make sure that he is, yes, he's the head coach, but he's really continuing to keep a focus on the offense, on the quarterback position. But you mentioned it. It really doesn't matter. He's getting the advice, I'm sure, from the other guys. It does not matter. It does not matter.
Here's the thing that I question, and this is what we're not seeing right now that we are eventually going to see. We're not going to see it against the Beavers. We're not going to see it against the Scarlet Knights. But we will, or we could, and maybe will, see it against the Horned Frogs. Shit hits the fan. It's a big 4th down. It's a big decision. Who makes the final call? The head coach. Is it going to be something where, with the dynamic between the three, is it going to be something where, let's say it's a big defensive stand or something, or a big offensive stand. If, let's say, offensively, Kevin Wilson goes, hey, you know what, I think we should do this. Is it going to be a, Day is making the decision, or are they all working together where it's like, hey, you know what, you think we should do that? Let's go ahead and do that. How is that going to work? That's the situation I go to, because the head coach, that's, to me, the most crucial part. Yeah, the whole how Urban Meyer motivates the guys, Greg Schiano is going to do that. That's what it kind of feels like. He's bringing that part of it to the coaching, even though he's not the interim head coach, as I use my air quotes for audio listeners. But when shit hits the fan and you need a game time decision where the clock is winding down and it's a big 4th down and the stadium is screaming at you and the noise level is loud and you got to make a decision, is Day the one making that decision, or are they delegating it to where depending on what it is, someone else is making that decision? And how is that going to work in that kind of a situation? That is one of the questions that I ask or that comes to my mind.
So I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Why are you being so hard on Ryan Day? What does it matter? Do you think he doesn't have the ability, the knowledge to be able to do it? I mean, he's a co-offensive coordinator and a running and the quarterbacks coach. You think he's an ignorant fool, doesn't know how to make a decision, hasn't been in college football enough to know what's going on, hasn't been around Ohio State enough to know how they're going to run things and how Urban Meyer will do things? I mean, I just feel like you right off the bat, you had just a really big issue with him, and I don't really understand why.
I wouldn't say the word arrogant fool. Like, I wouldn't say that.
Ignorant
fool. But the thing that I look to is experience, especially when it comes to a head coach, especially when you have a game. Let's say that third game was like Morehead State, whatever. Make Ryan Day the head coach, because then in all three of your games, you're not going to, like, it doesn't matter who you have the head coach. You win all three of those games. But to me, because of that TCU game, which that's the one you circle now because of the Urban Meyer suspension. Urban Meyer could be in Florida drinking Mai Tais. The Buckeyes still beat the Beavers this weekend. They still beat the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I'm sorry, Rutgers fans. But that's just how it is. They could walk in blindfolded, win both of those games. It's the TCU game that I look at. And for me, for a guy who has been, he's been co-offensive coordinator, but who's really pulling the strings, Urban Meyer. He's been a quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, has never had that experience as a head coach. The question that I have with him is when you're thrown into that situation. I'll relate it to this sense for me. When I was in college, going through becoming an educator, you could put me in several situations with how what we would do is either experience hours, observing a teacher in the field, or by teaching the students in my class, which were fellow college kids. You could put me in those situations and it's like, oh, I know exactly what to do. I'm doing what the teacher says. I'm doing what I see in those office hours. But the first time I stepped into a classroom and was presented with something that I had never seen, it's kind of like, it's a shock at first.
You think he's never seen this?
He's never been a head coach. He's never had to take on this role. And that's what I'm saying.
He stands on the sideline.
No.
He knows what decisions are made and when they're made.
But it's different watching an Urban Meyer make the decision than being the guy with the big boy pants on.
But don't you learn? But don't you learn a little bit sometimes by watching? Is what I'm trying to get at.
And that's what I'm saying. Look at me. I watched and did everything in college, but still that first day teaching, it's a different animal. And that is what I'm getting at. I'm not saying that Ryan Day can't get over that hump, and I'm not saying that Ryan Day can't be successful with it. But to me, I get nervous when I look at the TCU game and you have two guys on this staff that have head coaching experience and you go with the guy who doesn't have head coaching experience. That's the only thing I look at. It has nothing to do personally with Ryan Day. It has more to do that you've got two guys with head coaching experience, yet you pick the guy who doesn't.
I have no issue with it. I think that I actually appreciate Gene Smith, and who knows, maybe Urban Meyer said, "Hey, have Day do it. Have Day be the interim coach while I'm out." I don't know. We weren't there.
Because we all know Urban Meyer's judgment is impeccable.
But I think that him giving and like I was saying, I appreciate Smith for giving Day the opportunity for him to be able to do that, and then at least be able to have interim head coach for 3 games on his resume, because you don't learn unless you're doing it. A lot of times, right? As you're pointing out, even though I still think Day's able to look at and see what Urban Meyer is doing on certain situations and what they talk about in practice and everything like that, he knows he could be the head coach if he wanted to for a couple of games. I mean, especially these 3 games, I don't think there's really going to be that big of an issue. But I guess I look at it as, again, like I just mentioned, not that big of a deal, especially for the first 2 games. They're going to win them either way. and like you mentioned, blindfold them. They'll still probably win it going that far. That's probably disrespectful for Rutgers and Oregon State. But I think that
Ohio State's just on a different level.
I just think that there's no problem with it. And it's not going to affect Ohio State. Just, if Greg Schiano was the interim head coach, I don't think they're going to be oodles and oodles better. And then I don't think you can say with Greg Schiano as the interim head coach, they would blow TCU out of the water. But with Day, I don't know what they're going to do. That's just not the case. So that's why I think with what you're saying, I think you've made more of a bigger issue out of probably a non-issue than it probably needed to be.
And like I said, will the players think about this? No. Are the coaches probably thinking about this? No. But this is why we have a podcast. This is why we talk. This is what we think about, and this is what I think about of if I'm going to want someone to be the head coach for 3 games while my guy sits on the sideline, I would go with one of the guys who has experience in that situation. And if it was an Urban Meyer suggestion, it's just it's Urban looking out for a guy, and it's exactly what you said. If Urban Meyer made the suggestion to have it be Day, it's only because Urban wants Day to get this experience so that he can help a buddy out. It had nothing to do with But
I also think that's appreciated. That's how those things happen.
But
that's how we get experience.
Well, let me flip it this way, and I'll flip it into the other part that I knew we were going to get into, but I wanted to focus on the football side first. What do you think of the suspension? What are your thoughts on the 3-game suspension for Urban Meyer?
I have a lot of respect for Urban Meyer. I loved him at Florida. I think he's a good man. I think he's a good coach, and I think that he had a really bad, I won't even say it's a lapse in judgment. I think he really handled the whole situation very poorly. Mm-hmm. And I said on my show, on this MVP network, that if it comes out that Urban Meyer did not report what he needed to report to the compliance office, I think that it shouldn't be a suspension. He should be fired. And I understand. Well, I guess I don't necessarily understand, but I see when people say he's a football coach. He doesn't need to worry about that stuff. Well, guess what? It was something that was brought to his attention. And as a mandatory reporter, you then have to worry about that stuff. It becomes your problem as well then. Not that you asked for it, not that you wanted it, not that, in the grand scheme of things in football, that should be anything to do with your job. But in the grand scheme of life and what needs to be done to protect others, it is then your problem. Urban Meyer should no longer be the football coach of Ohio State. That's my opinion. Yell at me, curse me out, tell me that I'm a loser. That's fine. I do not care. I think it didn't matter if it was Urban Meyer, if it was the head coach of Rutgers. It doesn't matter who it was. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. And not only do I think Urban Meyer should no longer be the head coach, I think Gene Smith should no longer be the athletic director. I think Gene Smith and Urban Meyer should have both been fired. They knew about it. They did not report it to the compliance office. They did not take the step that they should have. And people will say, well, Urban Meyer let Gene Smith know. Well, guess what? It didn't get to the proper channel, so it didn't end up working out for anybody, and it helped no one. And while Courtney and Zach Smith are probably both a little messed up, I think that this is something that needed to be taken all the way to the spot where it needed to be, which was the compliance office, which is where they would then handle it. And I know that it says within here, and this is a quote, a number of OSU athletic department personnel, including but not limited to Coach Meyer and athletic director Gene Smith, emphasize the critical importance of there being an actual arrest or charge filed or court order issued to determine whether there has been conduct that violates or potentially violates the law or the OSU sexual misconduct policy, necessitating a report to departmental compliance in the University Office of Compliance and Integrity. It is well established in the area of domestic violence and sexual abuse that complaints frequently, indeed in the overwhelming majority of cases, may decide not to come forward or may cease to pursue charges when there has, in fact, been domestic violence or abuse. There has, in fact, been domestic violence or abuse in this situation. Nothing that Zach Smith was charged for legally in 2015. 2009, different story. That was hidden too. But it's that first paragraph, it's that first part where Urban Meyer and Gene Smith are able to somehow get away with not being fired. And I do not say this because I want to see people get fired from their jobs, but it's just like if someone, and we talked about this before the podcast, the example of James Gunn. He had tweeted out things way back in the past, a number of things. It wasn't a one-time thing. He gets fired. Other people, same type of thing, they don't get fired. Then another person does it, but they do get fired. Where's consistency? This was not handled appropriately. It should not have been a suspension. It should have been a firing. And I say that with the absolutely, honestly, utmost respect for Urban Meyer. I like him. I think he's actually got great character. He really does. And I think he's got great values. But I think, again, loyal to a fault is a real thing. Well, and Urban Meyer was loyal to a fault to Zach Smith, who did not deserve his loyalty. And
that's just it. Where, to me, I would say, when you say that phrase, loyal to a fault, I almost hate you for saying that. Like, I don't hate you, but I almost hate that you said it, because I've always said about myself, yeah, one of the things that is maybe a flaw is I'm loyal to a fault. But Brandon, I will tell you this, and I'm going to use you as the example just because we're on this podcast. If, let's say, it came out tomorrow that a girl that you were dating or whatever, that you hit her or whatever, if it ended up being true, you would be gone. Like, I wouldn't want to do this with you anymore. I wouldn't want you to be a part of this anymore. And that's what should have happened. Like, to me, the biggest problem in this is that line of loyalty where, yes, it is good to be loyal to someone. Yes, it is good to, hey, you know what? Your grandfather was a mentor to me, so I'm going to help you out. And, like, I'm going to look after you. But then there has to be a line where once it was proven true, and maybe not even that, maybe just the loyalty needs to be, hey, this needs to be looked at. I need to tell my AD. And the thing that was interesting that I believe it was on ESPN, I can't remember who said it, they're like, this was before a decision came out. They're like, well, if he gets suspended, it's going to be interesting to what they found, because if it's something where, oh, I told my AD and I didn't do it, it was something like, oh, they're going to find a way to suspend him so they don't have to fire him. And for me, the best line from this whole Urban Meyer situation, and I'm probably going to say his name wrong, he's an ESPN college football analyst, Trevor Maddich. He said that the first thing that this shows, well, first he said he apologizes on behalf of Urban Meyer. He apologizes to Courtney Smith and anybody who is a victim of domestic violence. But the thing that this shows is that Ohio State and that Urban Meyer maybe don't really care about Courtney Smith, don't care about the victims of domestic violence. Because for me, I think the line should have been drawn to where if I was Urban Meyer, and yes, I'm loyal to you, if that is even an accusation, I am going to who I have to go to, because that action goes against everything that our relationship is built around. And that is the problem with this, is that Urban Meyer, like you said, let that loyalty get in the way of doing what was right or what should have been done.
And we don't know everything that went on between Zach Smith and Urban Meyer, and we don't know, how good of friends they were and what they did outside of football and their closeness outside of that. But what we have heard, and of course we're only hearing negative, and I do admit that, but Zach Smith didn't deserve his loyalty. And what I'm hearing, Zach Smith didn't deserve any bit of his loyalty. Caused problems for him in 2009, caused problems for him again in 2015. He has been a problem for Urban Meyer, a problem and a distraction that Urban Meyer did not need, and he kept him on his staff.
Well, I told
and he
you,
allowed him to come over to Ohio State when Urban Meyer went to Ohio State. He had an opportunity to say,
to just cut
Zach,
the cord.
thanks, I can't. But he didn't. He didn't, and that was where again, you had that opportunity to just say no, Zach. I can't do it anymore. You did not.
Well, and that's why when we watched the interview that ESPN did with Smith came out, and I remember I watched it, and then I remember showing it to you, and after you had watched it for the first time, I told you, I don't trust him. B, it doesn't sit right with me. Like, in that interview, he was talking, like, the answers he was giving, I was sitting there going, yeah, an abuser would say that. An abuser would say, well, Urban Meyer didn't need to know. He didn't need to know about that. Well, why didn't he need to know? Oh, because if he found out, then you would have been caught. Oh, if it found out, then it would have meant trouble for you. That's the one thing. And then also, the second thing that I was thinking while you were kind of talking is when you mentioned he could have cut the cord, part of me then comes to the whole thought process. You can say it in different ways, but I'll go off of bringing him on to Ohio State. Urban Meyer brought this upon himself. There's only one person to blame in this, and that is Urban Meyer. If he would have cut the cord after the Florida days, would have never been in this situation, because Smith would have never been on the coaching staff. But then also, if he would have just done what he was supposed to do, would have never been in this situation.
Well, remember, too, is that part of the early reports by Brett McMurphy was that Urban Meyer and his wife, Shelley, were actually helping Zach and Courtney through counseling. So Urban may have believed, okay, everything's all right. Yes, it was bad in the past. There's years have passed. They've gone through counseling. Hopefully it's better. Urban Meyer, I'm assuming, is not at the Zach and Courtney Smith household every single night checking in to make sure everything's good. Maybe he is. Maybe they're having Sunday night dinners. I doubt it. But it is not Urban Meyer's job to be checking in and on that. But it is his job
to report,
to be reporting things that he has been told to the right person, and that right person, unfortunately, is not your athletic director. It is the compliance officer.
It would be, I'm going to relate this again to my teaching background. It would be like if I, as a teacher, saw signs of abuse of a student and just didn't do anything. Yeah. Like, that's what it is. And I kind of feel like, Urban Meyer brought this upon himself. And one of the other things I found interesting is they said in the investigation that, Urban deleted his text messages and we just couldn't see what was being sent. And whoever the analyst on ESPN was like, wait a second. It didn't come across your mind that, let's grab her phone who he was texting and get his text that way. Like, that was one of the big things that it's like, do you not know how cell phones work? Like, Brandon, if we're texting back and forth and I delete my text message, you can't see what me and Brandon was saying, why wouldn't you go, all right, let's just get Brandon's phone. Let's see if we can see the conversation on Brandon's phone. And they didn't do that. So, I mean, this whole investigation, too, to where the last thing I'll ask you is, should the NCAA get involved? Kind of like what they did with Penn State for the Sandusky situation.
That was a real mess. While this is bad, that was a real mess. And I don't necessarily know if the NCAA needs to get involved at this point, but here's the troubling thing is, Ricky, is the fact that Urban Meyer and the director of operations for Ohio State, for the football team, we're going through and trying to change the settings to make sure that anything that was deleted over a year couldn't be seen.
Mm-hmm.
That's troubling. Why? The timing's not good. The timing is not good at all on that. Why would you need to do that? What's your reasoning behind that? And supposedly they went and they couldn't find them. They couldn't find those messages that may have been deleted.
Mm-hmm.
And a forensics person had said, well, if you use the right equipment, if you have the right system and software and this and that and the other thing, and you really want to find something, you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I wonder if in the investigation they even tried to look at that, or how hard they actually tried. And I'm not saying we need to burn him at the stake. Not at all. But we need to find out every single thing, what he knew, what he did not know, because he openly lied and said he didn't know anything about that at Media Day. He had no knowledge of it. He knew exactly what was going on. So he was deceitful. He didn't do what he was supposed to do in terms of reporting. And it's just a really bad look for Urban Meyer. And I don't think this affects their football season, which thank God for that. But I do think it affects how people will view Urban Meyer going forward. The Ohio State
Does it hurt his recruiting?
The Ohio State faithful will remain faithful to him. The fan base, they ain't going anywhere. It's like Donald Trump. He could tweet something again, and his fan base is going nowhere. But you asked about the recruiting. I don't think so either. He's an outstanding head coach, and just because he made some poor decisions or didn't do anything by obviously, again, like by reporting it, he didn't do anything there. And but it is a poor decision. He's an outstanding football coach. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to win. Why would you not want to play for him?
Here's the thing, and this was brought up by Trevor Manich, where I'm kind of on the fence about it, because myself, throughout my life, my mother has played a big influence on some of the big decisions in my life, a person I go to when I need advice on something. And he brought it up and said that this is going to hurt Urban Meyer recruiting-wise, because he said he will have a hard time now walking into a house, and he won't have a hard time trying to convince the kid to come to Ohio State, but convince the mother that I'm going to take care of your boy, and I am going to teach your boy to become a man. Where if you look at it now, and this comes back to the whole situation, the whole thought process that I have, is what this whole thing shows with this investigation. You even mentioned it too, where, maybe they didn't look into this. It just shows that Ohio State, and maybe Urban Meyer, but definitely Ohio State, because they did the investigation, does not care about A, Courtney Smith, and B, does not care about domestic violence or victims of domestic violence, or maybe women in general. You could maybe go that far, but I wouldn't. I would just keep it to the domestic violence. And if I was a mother, I wouldn't want my son playing for Urban Meyer after that. I wouldn't want him playing for Urban Meyer. I wouldn't want him going to Ohio State after this, because I would be sitting there as a mom going, what kind of men are you raising out there? Because when I give you my son, when I send him to Ohio State, you're supposed to help raise him on the football team, a part of that football team, when I can't be there with him. So it's that situation also, to where I'm on the fence of like, will it really hurt? Only time will tell. But I wouldn't be surprised if his recruiting did take a little bit of a knock because of mothers that are like, no, I don't want you to go there. Maybe we see a lot more mothers hold the facts in their hand and not let their sons fax off the letter of intent, like we've seen. Like the one mom wanted the son to go to LSU and he picked Florida.
A lot of people look at the 3-game suspension as the punishment for Urban Meyer. Ricky, what you just said, that's the punishment. Him having to go into households, have that awkward encounter, that awkward interaction with a family, with a mom, with a dad, and have to be able to explain himself. And he won't be. He won't be able to explain how he not covered up, but how he was deceiving the media, saying he knew nothing about it, and then not reporting it to the compliance officer. That's going to be his punishment. That's what it's going to be, going into a number of households, talking with a number of families, trying to explain himself. And when a mom says, that's BS, I can't believe you would ever do something like that and not take it seriously, because people could say whatever. He's got to stand there or sit there and take that. And that is punishment.
The other thing I think of, and this is me on the other side, and there might be some people that go, oh, that's low, but it's recruiting, whatever gets you the player. I think that Jim Harbaugh, Mark D'Antonio, and James Franklin would be absolute morons if they were not bringing this up. If it was a player like for Jim Harbaugh, yes, at first you want to preach your own university and you want to sell them on yours, but if it's one where it's coming down between you or Ohio State, I'd throw it out there. What kind of man do you want your son to be? We know what they think at Ohio State. I mean, that is another thing. It's not just what Urban Meyer has to face. Now, any coach that is rivaling for an Ohio State player can throw that right into the mess and kind of say, well, we're not like that over here at Alabama. Well, Alabama, they would choose Alabama over Ohio State maybe, but more like Michigan State. Well, we don't do that in East Lansing. We're not like that in Ann Arbor. That's another thing that could be thrown into the pot. Maybe we see more big-time recruits go over to a Michigan State, and Penn State than an Ohio State. I'm not saying like a huge amount, but maybe a little bit.
I just think it's a tough situation. It's an unfortunate situation. Like I said, I don't think that Urban Meyer or Gene Smith should be employed by Ohio State any longer. I have a lot of respect for Urban Meyer, but there's a lot of people who have respect for other people who see those people do poor things. You can still have respect for them, but you can be very disappointed, and then you have to follow what needs to come after that. And what I think needed to come after this was not a suspension for either one; it was a firing. And that's going from an area of, I don't like to see people get fired for no reason, for silly things, for little things. I don't think this was a little thing. I just don't, with everything that happened with it. And all the backstory with it, and the fact that there was so much reporting, and there was it was so much deeper than was just on the surface. That's why I believe what I believe.
Well, and the last thing I'll say is I think the NCAA should get involved and should do an investigation of their own, mainly because of the fact that maybe Ohio State didn't do enough and didn't do the due diligence that they should have done in their investigation, and the NCAA, who would be a non-biased party, should look into it to get the right answers. Whether that means Urban Meyer gets fired, then that's what it means. But we need to get answers, and the investigation that Ohio State did, I don't think suffices. And it was just, hey, what can we say so that we don't have to fire Urban Meyer? Because if we have to fire Urban Meyer, that would be very bad for our program. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. First off, what does it mean for Ohio State's football year? And then everything else we talked about. What do you think about everything? What is your thought process? What do you think down below in that comment section?